It's a great pleasure to be here with all of you today. We are really thrilled to be able to have this conversation. Thanks to the Wallace Foundation for the invitation. And thank you so much for everyone here who's joined us. I want to kind of root this conversation about the link between strategic vision and high performance in the present moment, because the ability to innovate and reconfigure are really critical when the environment is this turbulent and this hostile. We know that change is going to happen for better or for worse. This is really an opportunity to contemplate an organization's core values, its strengths, its strategic vision, and its sense of purpose coming out of crisis. So as one of the participants had said, crisis doesn't build character, crisis reveals character. So it's a question of what is the character of the organizations and how we want to serve the community moving forward. This research really set up to ask 3 questions. First and foremost, what are examples of arts organizations that have financially outperformed others in substantial ways, or come close to shutting down or in the bottom ranking of performers, but then engineered a financial turnaround? And so to approach answering these questions, we analyzed KIPIs, or Key Intangible Performance Indicators, on 7 financial and operating metrics over a span of 5 to 7 years. What KIPIs do is they take into account an organization's characteristics. They take into account its context. So what arts discipline does it operate in? What is its budget size? What community is it serving? What are the community's characteristics? It's all trying to establish a level playing field before assessing whether or not it is outperforming what you would expect of it, given who it is and where it operates. So through the data, in combing through it, we identified 10 high-performing arts organizations and 10 turnaround organizations that represented a variety of arts and cultural sectors in both the performing arts and the visual arts. And they ranged considerably in terms of budget size. The median budget for both of these 2 cohorts was around $2 million. But that was just the identification. From there, we said, well, what kinds of strategies were used to achieve this performance? And were there particular contexts or conditions in which these strategies seemed to be more effective, which requires talking to people. So our methodology here was something called theories in use, which just seeks to capture the mental model of how things work from the perspective of individuals who are closest to the problem, meaning that it involved hour-long conversations that were semi-structured and probed arts leaders' input into these 2 questions. We heard that success takes a slow, controlled burn, that grounded plans recognize multiple steps. There's no single miracle moment or single action that provides success. We also heard resoundingly that success isn't accidental, it isn't haphazard. All interviewees possess a mental model or a playbook for how success happens. And here is how they see the link between strategy and financial sustainability. The cornerstones for success were commonly identified as high quality programming standards and community orientation. So those we spoke with attributed their success to the alchemy, if you could say, between high standards and the creation of work that's meaningful to the local community. And therein lies the formula for strategic vision, or an organization's unique answer to the question, how will you have created value and for whom? It's a deceptively simple statement with profound implications. And a lot of organizations never get right the fact that this isn't an either or, it's a both and. You need to have both of these aspects. Now, it's not surprising most arts and cultural organizations have high quality programming standards as part of their mission. We all seek artistic excellence. But I want to hit a little bit on this notion of community orientation, which has to run deep. So community orientation really forces organizations to rethink whether and how they deeply serve and serve more segments of their community. When organizations provide programming that makes them relevant really to a very small slice of the community, what happens in terms of risk when this small slice diminishes in size with shifting demographics? But it's also a missed opportunity to have a larger footprint. So the instinct is to ask, as you're trying to develop audiences and serve more members of the community, to say, well, we've tried, and why don't those other segments of the community find relevance in the programming we provide? A community orientation really presses the question, well, why doesn't the organization provide programming that those other segments of the community would find relevant? Community orientation really requires getting out into the community, listening, participating reciprocally, learning, responding, all of which lead to relationship building. So asking the question, how can we serve you? How would you like to be involved? One of the participants said, ask for the truth and have the humility to hear it. When these cornerstones, these elements are in place, they pave the way for short-term tactical wins that inspire confidence and excitement. They build the brand. They strengthen relationships with the board, with employees, and with external stakeholders who are energized by the organization's strategic vision. As one arts leader commented, when you see progress, everyone's attitude becomes optimistic. Success breeds success. And so what are the signs that the strategy is starting to get traction? And I encourage, particularly for organizations that are shut down, to start imagining what is that first early win. We know, however, that both external and internal factors come into play to moderate the organization's ability to translate these cornerstones into short-term outcomes. And moderating can mean that they either accelerate it or that they hold it back. And so we're looking at external threats that were brought up in our conversations included downward industry trends, such as changes in consumer preferences. We heard about shifts in funder priorities, local population changes, the impact of tax reform on individual contributions, effects of COVID virus clearly, and the movement for racial justice all have an impact on enhancing or inhibiting an organization's ability to reach short-term outcomes. Internal factors are really critical and were brought up unanimously. Once there's clarity around the organization's mission and its vision for excellent relevant programming in the context of its community, staff and board have to all align behind and embrace it. All organizational decisions have to be aligned with mission. It flourishes in a positive, healthy culture which repeatedly was characterized by trust, transparency, open communication, participatory management style, respect, positive energy. Building and repairing trust is particularly critical for turnaround organizations. High performance requires a balance of steadfastness and mission alignment capability to adapt as needed. So adaptive capability is another internal factor. The ability to see and seize opportunities. It requires investments in professional staff and a multi-year horizon. And in and of itself, the act of creating a roadmap to attaining or retaining financial stability feeds optimism. The short-term gains both reinforce the organization's strategic vision, and that flywheel starts to turn as short-term outcomes translate into intermediary outcomes of balanced growth. So what does balanced growth look like once the flywheel starts to turn? And these are increased audience and donor participation and engagement and increased organizational capacity. So your people proposition, your revenue proposition starts to grow to support an even greater sense of value proposition. These resource and relationship wins have impact positively on the organization in two ways. First, they go back and they reinforce the strategic vision, the community orientation, and they advance the ability to provide high quality programming standards. Second, they lead to financial stability, provided the organization has the discipline to stay within its means and to make conservative strategic decisions in the face of uncertainty. Since arts and cultural organizations exist for mission fulfillment and not for financial sustainability, which it may look like this is the end result in this model, what we really see instead is a virtuous cycle where when organizations are able to stay within their means, make all of the different elements work, then this happens to feed kind of a virtuous cycle where long-term outcomes of financial success and sustainability support the ability to maximize mission success. And that's our model, and now I have the great pleasure. I'm going to stop my screen share there. I would like to share this conversation with three participants in the Alchemy research who can speak firsthand to their model of how success happens. I have the great pleasure of having with us Zanetta Drew, Executive Director of Dallas Black Dance Theater, Michael Bateman, Managing Director of the Noise Within Theater, and Kim Noltemy, the President and CEO of the Dallas Symphony Organization. Welcome to you all. And since we've just taken a look at this model, I want to ask, just starting out, what are your thoughts and reactions? Are there strategic elements described in the model, the mental map, that you find are resonating with you now more than ever? And Michael, what are your thoughts?
Thanks, Zanny. It's a real honor to be here. Yeah, the mental map brings up a lot of, puts together a lot of pieces that you just you get used to having these tools of financial stability and short-term wins. But the first thing that comes to mind for me right now, in the pandemic is this idea of the first early win. I joined the organization where we just had a huge win in 2013, which was the completion of a building, right? A completion of a theater that A Noise Within owns. Now I'm looking for a much smaller win to get us to the next step, and that's something that seems just so minute, but is so important. Receiving production and rehearsal reports. So, for anybody who's in the arts, to start seeing from stage management, from production staff, art is happening, rehearsals are happening, artists are working, even though it's virtual, right? Like getting those reports again feels like a really big win to me right now. So that's what I'm excited about.
That's great, Michael. Thank you. Zanetta, was it similar for you, or were there other elements that really stood out?
The one thing that stood out, thank you, Johnny, is really the board leadership, vision, and excellence. The pandemic has caused us to have to find new ways to create excellence, to be able to develop new financial models, and at the same time, expand our relevance to the community. And that's not just increase relevance, that's actually expand and find new additions to broaden our community connections. And so those were top of mind for Dallas Pike Dance Theater.
Great. Kim, any additional thoughts? Did something else touch you from the model?
Well, I mean, I think if people are watching, they probably think, wow, that's really common sense. But the reality is that's not how many arts organizations operate. And to stay focused on those principles and that model is incredibly helpful to any organization. And, for us as an organization that used to think about the quality of the critic's review, or the certain segment of the audience loving a concert, or the prestige within our industry of the music, when the reality is it matters in your community more than anything else. That is the relevance that we all need to succeed on the broader level. And if we don't start there, we're really never going to get there.
Well, Kim and Michael, I had the pleasure of speaking with you actually prior to mid-March when the pandemic started to ramp up, and prior to the racial justice unrest, and with you, Zanetta, just in September, months into these monumental events. I'm curious, how are you and your organizations faring right now in this environment? Have you been adapting to these challenging times? Kim, let me ask, and I'll start with you.
Sure. Well, the core of what we do is live music, right? So we needed to find a way to make sure that we could still offer live music to the community. So we've done an outdoor concert series of small groups, and we've had more than 90 performances since the pandemic started, in front yards, backyards, on streets, in parks, all over Dallas, trying to connect with as many people as possible. Also, we had to make sure our education programs continued, because we had 500 students enrolled in our Young Musicians program with free instruments and lessons several days a week. And then we have our Young Strings, where we had 200 kids very, very involved for many years. And so converting all of that activity to online, whether it's Zoom or FaceTime, was critical to those relationships. So those were two key pieces. And then we found a path to be able to have live concerts in our venue with small audiences, so we could maintain the continuity of our work.
Great. Well, Zanetta, I've heard you say that you are having the time of your life. So I'm curious if you could, just talk a little bit about, how is this moment resonating with Dallas Black Dance Theater?
This moment has created a level of excitement that is unparalleled for the organization. And I know that sounds very strange, but one of the things that our organization has really developed a forward vision every time we've been challenged by a crisis. And in 44 years, there just have been numerous ones. But what we always look for as we look to try to solve a problem is what kind of vision and what kind of opportunity can we develop as we are creating the solutions to the challenge. And so with this, we sat down the first couple of days with the artistic director, did a 90-day, a 6-month, and a 12-month plan. Meant that we had to envision a new business model. We had to look at technological capabilities. We had to look at moving to virtual, and we had to look at the fact that this might not be a finite event. It may take a lot longer to recover. In doing so, we looked at our past, looked at some of the distance learning programs that we had started developing back in the 90s, and really built on how we could broaden our education programs, how we could move our performances forward outside the theaters, and to be able to really have valuable content, not just virtual presentation, but create virtual experiences. So this summer, we introduced paid virtual performances, first desk company to do it consistently, and we've been able to move forward with selling more than 50% of our AT&T Performing Arts Center home theater capacity. That gave us lots of hope, and so now we've programmed an entire virtual season, and we've moved all of our academy and outreach programs to virtual platforms for the year. So we're very excited about it. We see lots of opportunity, and we are energized by the creativity that it is allowing us to utilize.
Right. Michael, is there a similar sense of excitement and innovation? How is the crisis being lived right now for A Noise Within?
Yeah, I think we can match Zanetta's optimism, if not pure excitement, which I think is amazing. You know, I think as you mentioned earlier, the idea of the crisis revealing character is really important. You know, for us, both having working capital and having human capital going into the crisis was critical. So there was a muscularity in both the staff's flexibility and willingness to pivot, and the board's willingness and ability to meet incredibly regularly, you know, especially our executive committee, to address the crisis head on. So, you know, March 12th, the morning of March 12th, we were going to have a student matinee that was canceled. But by the end of March, we had plans in place for virtual student programming. By April, we successfully executed our annual fundraising gala. And in the summer, we had our virtual Summer with Shakespeare camp, fully online. And what the fall has really given us the opportunity to do, particularly coming on the heels of you know, renewed focus on social justice and change, is to delve into that work, to open up, you know, community orientation as one of those cornerstones, was to go back to the community and to talk to our artistic partners through our Noise Now program, and get them in front of our audience virtually, and kind of build on that programming as we start to come back into the fall, into some more sort of full-length theatrical virtual work that we're doing. And as I said, I am excited about both the virtual and our plans for live performances in the spring. I don't think we're quite there as much as the other two organizations in Dallas maybe, but you know, we're really focusing on that as our North Star, is getting back to live performance as soon as we can.
Great. You mentioned community orientation, and certainly that's a big part of the model. And I know that you all have had amazing ways that you are responsive to your community, of really deeply serving the community with relevant work. What does your community expect of you now in these times? Has it changed? And so can you share some of your strategies? I've heard a lot within a digital realm. Are there different demands on the organization? Have your community's needs changed in this time? Michael, since you had just shared thoughts, let me ask you if you can share any additional thoughts just on that topic.
Sure. Yeah. One of the most revealing pieces of that mental model in terms of the community orientation is we recognize, in conversations with our community, we recognize that A Noise Within as a predominantly white institution needs to go back to that foundation in a major way and essentially dig up the piece of the cornerstone that relates to what that community orientation is, and really kind of, build that foundation back up from that baseline. So, in terms of what our audience is looking for, certainly they're looking for the same kinds of quality. They're looking for classic stories. They're looking for us to work with our educational partners and our students like we always have. But they're looking for us to really question what we mean by a universal story, right? What does that mean to our community? And so we've spent, a lot of time kind of retooling our strategic plan and talking to our community, especially our community of artists, about what that means, because, it's a piece that we've always been successful in engaging, that community orientation. We regularly do surveys and that kind of thing. But really in going back to our community in a very specific way and saying, what do you need from us right now? Is this focus on work that is just as much focused on sort of social justice in the current culture as it is on telling good stories well?
Kim and Zanetta, I would welcome your thoughts about the question as well. Have your communities needed anything differently from you during this time? Zanetta, what about for Dallas Black Dance?
We know that our organization began in the community, and we have great community connections. But in this time, when we look at the issues in our nation, really taking a look at the work that we're doing, and as we are able to choreograph our season and develop content, we're really looking at works that will touch, that will heal, that will educate, that will create an experience that will change lives. A lot of times we do produce art. We know what we are presenting out to the community, but we always don't know how it's being consumed. And this is a new environment for consumption. People have different feelings. They are much more intense. And so we're trying to be very careful that as we do the work of this organization, that we are creating broader connections. We have a very inclusive audience. And so we're wanting to make sure that we continue that, but that we have gains of education that have societal impact. That are much needed in today's situation. We can't speak enough to the fact that Dallas Black Dance Theater does not do social justice work. Our mere existence is social justice work. Therefore, we really have to work toward how we communicate that in a way that does not feel artificial and is authentic.
Wow. And Kim, these are just such great examples of how your organizations are responsive. What is it like for Dallas Symphony Association?
Well, I think that our community expected us to move forward, to be creative and flexible and find a way to move forward and take all the investment that was put in the organization for a long period of time and make sure that that was not wasted. And so, the creativity is everything from finding a way to have concerts safely, negotiating with the hospital system to get COVID tests every single day for every artist, which is a very mundane thing, but is a critical component to moving forward. Finding a way to have audiences in the building and making sure that we put safety first, but allowing people to have the opportunity to experience live music. And also, working with partners. Dallas Black Dance Theater and the Dallas Symphony are collaborating with the group called Project Unity next Wednesday, to have a concert with a limited audience, and we're live streaming that event. And we'll also release it after the fact for those who can't watch the live stream. And, that's taking a lot of creativity and energy, working together, but also each of our own organizations to make that happen in, very unique circumstances. So it'd be easier to do nothing, frankly. I mean, the stress would be much lower. You'd have to worry, more on the financial, but trust me, all these concerts we're doing are not gaining us financially. What they're giving us is the goodwill, the camaraderie, the spirit to move forward in the future. So that is an important investment for us to make.
So I'm curious, you each have such a strong sense of optimism and innovation. You are being responsive. Are there aspects of your organizations that you feel right now are at risk? I'm sure there are a lot of folks who are listening in who are going to join this conversation who may be struggling. So just thinking about the areas that you're thinking of, okay, this is something we need to pay attention to in this moment of time. Kim, any thoughts to share?
Well, I mean, I think it's always the financial. I mean, the orchestra business is precarious financially at best, right? If you're an orchestra with a huge audience, then you may earn 50% of your revenue in ticket sales, but you still need donations to support the organization for the rest of the budget. And it's an expensive business. It takes a lot of musicians to make great music come to life on stage. So, I think we're all worried. I'm very optimistic that this is the right path for the future of the Dallas Symphony, but I still have to worry about, making sure that we have all of the donations coming in and earn revenue wherever we can. And after seeing Zanetta's incredible work, offering performances online and charging for it, I said, well, let's follow her lead. And so we have also a membership. You can do a membership for our digital series, or you can buy per view. But the point is, this is a transformational period for all of the arts organizations. And we've all tried and failed many times over to get people to really engage with us digitally. And now we've finally kind of broken through all of that. So that is a great thing to have for the future on top of all of the other things that we do. But yes, we need money for all of this. And that's the hardest part for sure.
Sure. Zanetta and Michael, is it the financial aspect that keeps you up at night, or are there other aspects of the organization that make you worried? Zanetta, why don't you go? I just want to make sure that
Dallas by Desk Theater,
hearing your stories, yeah.
Sure. Yes, for Dallas by Desk Theater, certainly financials are going to be the challenge. We did not have an operating reserve. So for those organizations who didn't have cash reserves, it's day to day. However, one of the things that has happened is with the new vision and the energy, it has catapulted the interest for support, and we're certainly hoping that that's going to improve our financial model. But at the same time, dance is a very intimate art form, and so safety of the dancers, safety of the audiences. We serve an audience that has a higher propensity for COVID-19, and therefore the return to the theater is probably going to be much slower and lower in numbers than some other audiences. And so we are challenged by how we're going to reopen in the theater and have some type of financial equity and equivalency that allows us to retain in-theater performances going forward and the timing that those might occur.
Yeah, so, Zani, one of the criteria for the report was working capital and the health of that. And for theaters, 3 months is typically pretty good, right? It is a pretty good benchmark. That would have gotten us through June. Clearly not sufficient, right? So I'll obviously echo Kim's and Zanetta's point about the finances being important. But for me, the finances translate into I think, longer term concern, which is talent and people. You know, a great team doesn't come together overnight. A great staff doesn't just sort of land in your lap as much as you wish it would. And, you know, a fantastic team like I'm sure all three of these organizations have takes time and takes effort and attention to build. And, you know, for A Noise Within, we're currently, all of our staff that is hired around productions, our production staff, our front of house staff are entirely furloughed right now, unfortunately. And the rest of the administrative staff is on some version of partial cuts, right, to make it through. And, you know, so that's the area where I think there's the thing that keeps me up at night is the finances so that we can keep our incredibly talented team together and functioning. Because, you know, if that doesn't stay together over the longer term, then we have a setback in terms of a really high functioning team. So that's what I'm thinking is keeping me up most at night. But it's also the place where I have a lot of optimism because the team is great and they're doing awesome work right now. Yeah.
Well, just in response to that, Michael, how are you envisioning your future?
Yeah, we are, I think, as I said, a little bit behind Texas in terms of being live, but being live and in person again is a guiding star for us. Mm-hmm. That being said, you know, I do think, and I'm even seeing a little bit, I'm sneaking a look at the Q&As. I do think that there is a great deal of opportunity to increase access as we get really good at recording performances. We're going to have a reach that goes beyond our immediate geography, right? And I think we're all already experiencing that. Television was invented quite a while ago. You know, film has been around for a while. There are similar art forms to what we do that have that kind of reach. So we're not going to become a TV or film production company, right? Live is what we do and it's what we're best at. That's our comparative advantage. But it does give us an opportunity outside of our geographic area to serve audiences that we haven't served before. What I'm really excited about is, you know, we have student audiences. We serve about 19,000 students a year. They come from 2 hours away sometimes via bus, and our student matinees are 10:30 in the morning. So they're getting on a bus, you know, first thing in the morning to brave LA traffic to get here. The ability to have high quality filmed versions of our work going forward is going to serve audiences, and particularly student audiences, much outside of that. So accessibility is going to be a huge bonus going forward, I think.
And Kim, for the future for the Dallas Symphony, first, what time horizon are you keeping in mind right now within planning, and what do you reimagine?
I usually think in 5-year increments. So, you know, I feel that this is a pivotal moment for the Dallas Symphony because we all came together as a family and collaborators in a way that may not have happened for a very long time. And that means the orchestra, you know, orchestras are unions and we negotiate contracts with them. So working together as a family doesn't always happen in our business. The board, working with audience members, working with the community, really trying to find a way to connect in a very authentic and meaningful relationship. And all working together to move forward. And, you know, of course, the tactical, like the digital and all of that, which is part of it, but it's the broader spirit of we all understand that this music matters so much, and how do we transform ourselves to keep it vibrant and accessible to as many people as possible.
Zanetta, what are your thoughts?
Well, Kim's got a 5-year plan, and we've got a 20-year vision for not just our organization, but for the industry itself. We know that for the first time, the arts have a worldwide problem that is common to all of us. And so we're really looking at what can be a 21st century solution. Studies from the NEA, Wallace Foundation, National Endowment for the Arts, Americans for the Arts, all of those institutions have all found that and substantiated that audiences are declining. Ticket sales, earns revenue. We are a industry that has lots of challenges before COVID, and we now have an overarching opportunity that will allow us to be able to attract new participants. The pandemic has really opened the door for us to think strategically about not just our organization, but together as an industry, because many of the historical constraints to technology are falling. Intellectual property rights, unions, lots of the contractual terms are being revisited, and all of us are having to make adjustments. There are many folks who are technologically resistant to learning. Schools and homes and individuals, students did not have the technology to be able to be the recipients of our work. And so all of this has allowed us to think about where do we go as a future for the organization and as an industry. We looked at 25 years ago distance learning, and from that we looked at our home team, Dallas being the Dallas Cowboys, and looked at what they did back in the 60s using television, the technology of the time, to expand the focus of sports. Now you have a team on every corner. You know, have a little league team. But what you also have done is you fill these stadiums. After 20 years, people were building new stadiums. I think that we have an opportunity to look at how we collectively as an industry can actually go forward with both parallel in-person performances and also have new revenue streams to use the technology to serve all of the citizens and make everyone a user and a consumer of art. There are many communities that will never have a professional arts organization, will never have a theater, will never have a symphony. They also will not have performing arts centers. Art was being the number one thing for hope when COVID broke out. Whether you were a professional art maker or whether you were a novice, it was an essential worker for this nation. And so we have to continue it. It will give us gains in DEI. It will give us gains in revenue. It will expand our relevance. And it'll create, we hope, a more inclusive, financially viable global arts ecology and economy. And guess what? Our hope is that if we can do this as an industry, Dallas Bank Dance Theater, building out all those components, in 20 years, we just might be building new performing arts theaters. That's our vision.
These are each such big, inspiring visions. When I think about the model, I hear your stories, and there's so much, in the model, we called it adaptive capability, but innovation, there are big environmental changes, and you each seem to be seizing them, which is really exciting. I know that there are a lot of questions, and we would like to invite all of you who are with us today to join in the conversation by sharing your questions, sharing your comments. And I'm going to invite Christine Yoon to come in and share some of your questions with us. Let's keep the conversation going.
Okay, so we're going to try to get to as many questions as we can. And I think we should take this first one from Ella Bath. To the extent that you are comfortable talking about your board in this type of forum, can you tell us to what extent, and specifically how you and your board are working together during this challenging time?
Zanette, I know you've mentioned board. Do you want to go first, and others can comment?
I am excited. I think the one thing that we certainly have to keep in mind as organizations, that you need the support of boards and you need a high functioning board. The first thing that we did, because this was a human crisis, we had our human assets, a second company, dancers who did not have salaries, and they were not going to have living expenses. Before we made any public ask, we went to our board and asked them to be able to help provide 2 months of living expenses for 10 dancers. They did that within 5 days. That became the platform for our fundraising, to say that our board had developed the leadership for this pandemic, and here's how we're going to go forward. So certainly we are excited to have the approval, the endorsement, and the philanthropy of our board to help us embrace the vision that has been articulated.
Kim, how about at the Symphony and the board?
You know, our board has been incredibly supportive, but I think the big challenge is always aligning the board with the changing vision and priorities, right? Because we haven't had a COVID before. You know, many boards of arts organizations have been through financial crises of organizations. This is not unusual, but this is a different model completely because there's so many unknown factors. And so having a board that really can focus on what do we care about as an institution and how do we get to that point despite COVID, I think is critical. And a quick hi to Ella, long time no see.
Michael, do you have any additional thoughts to share?
Yeah, just real quickly, I'll share that especially over the summer, our executive committee was meeting weekly. And you know, that gave me great confidence, right? Because it let me have conversations with real smart cookies who could be sounding boards for some of these things. We're all reinventing the wheel, you know, at this point, and so to have some additional brains on that issue was really, really valuable. And the second thing I'll say is that after the murder of George Floyd, after the unrest of the summer, it was our board of directors and our equity, diversity, and inclusion committee that said, let's go back to our strategic plan that we were 1 year into a 5-year plan. So let's go back, let's strip away a whole bunch of this. Let's make sure it's focused on our equity, diversity, and inclusion efforts going forward. And we're going to be approving that revision on Tuesday. But I'm, you know, super proud of their leadership in making that a priority. So that's really been kind of a driving force of the organization over the past few months.
Great. I'm going to combine a couple questions from Wendy Putnam and Maria Ta and some others. For each of you that are creating and disseminating digital content, how is that driving revenues for your organization? Is it more effective in generating charitable support, for example, or are you able to monetize these with a pay-per-view model? Have you reevaluated pricing structure and your digital virtual programming in light of the economic crisis and hardship folks are feeling? And if so, in what ways?
I imagine that we've got a diversity of responses to the question. Kim, would you like to share what's going on in terms of monetizing content or getting contributed support for it?
Sure. So we started offering this content probably 7 weeks ago. So we're relatively new into it. We are seeing a lot of membership sales. So, you know, if you want to buy the annual digital concert series membership, that seems to be something that people are interested in having so that they can have the flexibility to watch whenever they'd like. We have not seen a lot of sales on the pay-per-view. That could be our marketing and PR isn't really out there enough yet. There's a lot of pieces to this. But certainly it does, the people who are watching it tend to be from other countries, which is interesting because that, you know, sort of speaks to who the artists are and what the program is as opposed to a specific interest in the Dallas Symphony. So I think that is, but the marketing and PR of all of this is another challenge, right? Because we're not set up to really have the system to to market that yet. That's not what we are. We're not Amazon. We're not one of these tech companies. So we're working through all of that now, and hopefully we can come out on the other end of that. But it's really critical to our future success to be able to do it. And obviously we're going to offer some things free as well, but we want to get people in the right mindset to be paying for product just like they would to come to a concert.
Right. And Zenetti, your experience was this is an earned revenue generator, right?
Right. The one thing that we know that we're going to still need philanthropic support. However, we wanted to be able to start to show on our financial bottom line that we had some source of earned revenue. Many nonprofits were stating zero earned revenue. And so we know that donors would become fatigued, and certainly there's going to be a gap. But we did do modeling for the pricing and came up with prices that we thought would be a family viewing price that would be something that would be affordable and sensitive to the pandemic and the economy that folks were feeling. But at the same time, we see this as a growing model. We see opportunities for touring with performing arts centers that are already contacting us to be able to present our work internationally and nationally. We see educational opportunities with school districts who are looking to buy our programs. And so with that, we see new revenue models that will continue to grow. And certainly we have about 25 media partners that have all jumped in to help us with our virtual programming. And so at this point, we are promoting our virtual programs the same way we would have done our in-person performances.
And Michael, what's the experience with The Noise Within?
Yeah, I think that, again, going back to the model and thinking about that high quality piece, you know, for A Noise Within, we're unusual for our size as a theatre in having a greater proportion of our budget taken care of by earned revenue than contributed revenue. So, you know, that's a big piece to make up. But we want to make sure that, you know, when we start charging, right now we're doing virtual programming on a donation basis. I'll suggest a donation basis. When we start charging for it, we want to make sure that that quality of virtual programming is equivalent to, if not the same as, the quality that our audience expects from our live programming. And our artistic directors have always been, you know, very careful watchers and keepers of that artistic quality. So we're going to be gearing up for that level of quality in the spring. Right now, I wouldn't say that, you know, we have great professional artists doing the virtual work we have, but we haven't brought that production quality up to that same level that we'd feel comfortable charging for yet, and we're kind of gearing up in that direction.
I think we have time for one last rapid fire answer. I'm going to paraphrase a question from Hannah Greneman. When you look back on this time, what do you want the story of your organization to be of this time to your audience and your donors?
I'm just going to jump in, and I think go back to the crisis revealing character thing. I want the story to be that our audience, our board, our artists saw that our values were so strong that we didn't let go of or lose any of them during this time, that it was our values that guided our actions rather than having to scramble and panic and come up with something that would get us through. That it's really the strength of the way those values are grounded that is getting us through this challenging time, and will see us successfully out the other side.
Zanetta?
I would hope that I would like for the future to reflect on Dallas Pike Dance Theater as a thought leader, as being innovative and really using the pandemic as a catalyst to be able to move the industry forward and our organization in ways that we never dreamed.
Kim?
I would just say 4 words: safety, quality, creativity, and perseverance.
I love all of that. Thank you so much on those notes. I regret that we must wrap things up. We had so many fantastic questions in the chat. I'm so sorry to all of you who spent your time that we didn't get to all the questions. But With deep appreciation, thank you so much, Kim, Snetta, Michael, Zani, for joining us today and sharing your experiences. And Zani, thank you so much for the research from SMU Data Arts, which has been and continues to be invaluable to the field now more than ever. Lastly, a big thank you to our audience. We know how busy you are, and we appreciate you spending your hour with us. We'll be sending a very brief survey on this session. So if you have an extra minute, please, we really do value your feedback. If you remember in the intro, we value data, sharing data and evidence. We really take those survey responses to heart. We'll post an account of today's conversation on our blog later this month. And please join us for our next session in the conversation series, which will be on Wednesday, November 18th at 1 p.m. Eastern. And we'll explore scenario planning for uncertain times with Daniel Payne of AEA Consulting. And really thank you again for joining us, and for our panelists and for Zani, really for sharing your time, your willingness, and